The war room smelled of ozone and recycled air. Commander Thane's scaled fingers traced patterns across the holographic display, each movement precise and deliberate. 300 years of military service had taught him that every battle followed predictable patterns. Enemies made logical choices. Allies followed established doctrine. Wars ended when one side calculated the cost too high to continue. Today felt different, though he couldn't explain why. The newest species to join the Galactic Coalition sat across from him at the briefing table. Humans, they called themselves. Soft-skinned bipeds with short lifespans and primitive technology. Their representative, Captain Reed, listened to the tactical overview with unreadable dark eyes. She had asked few questions during the orientation, nodded at appropriate times, and offered no objections to coalition military protocols. Thane found her politeness suspicious. "The situation on Kepler-7 is straightforward," he explained, manipulating the display to show the mining colony's layout. 37 civilian hostages, mixed group of pirates from various species. Standard demands for credits and safe passage. Captain Reed leaned forward slightly. "How long have they been holding?" "The hostages? 14 hours. Well within acceptable parameters for negotiation." "Acceptable to whom?" The question caught Thane off guard. "To coalition doctrine, Captain. We've resolved 847 similar situations using established protocols. Patience prevents unnecessary casualties." Reed's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Of course. What's the typical resolution time?" "Between 18 and 36 hours, depending on variables. The pirates always negotiate eventually. Economic pressure overcomes emotion." "And casualties?" Thane's crest flattened slightly. This human asked uncomfortable questions. "Minimal. We typically lose 2 to 3% of hostages during final negotiations. Acceptable losses given the alternative of a full assault. Captain." Reed was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke, her voice carried a tone Thane had never heard before. Not anger, not fear, but something harder to define. "Commander, may I review the hostage profiles?" "Certainly." Thane activated the display. Faces appeared in the air between them. Men, women, children from a dozen different species. Colony workers and their families who had simply been in the wrong place when the pirates arrived. Reed studied each face carefully. She lingered on the younger ones, the families grouped together in the manifest. "This little girl," she said, pointing to a human child of perhaps 6 years. "Amy Walsh. She's traveling with her parents?" "Correct. The family transferred to Kepler-7 last month. The father is a mining engineer." "And this elderly gentleman?" "Retired Coalition naval officer, lives on the colony with his daughter's family." Reed continued through the profiles methodically. She asked about their jobs, their families, their reasons for being on Kepler-7. Thane found the exercise pointless, but answered each question. These were statistics, variables in an equation. Knowing their personal details wouldn't change the tactical situation. When Reed finished, she sat back in her chair. "Commander, how many hostage situations have you personally commanded?" 43. "Average casualties?" Thane's throat sac contracted with mild irritation. 2.7%, well below coalition standards. That's about 32 people over your career. Unavoidable losses. The alternative would have been much higher casualties from precipitous action. Captain Reed stood and walked to the viewport. Beyond the reinforced transparent aluminum, Kepler-7 hung in space like a small brown marble. "Commander, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll answer honestly." "Proceed." "When you calculate those acceptable losses, do you ever think about their names?" The question made no sense. "I don't understand the relevance." Reed turned, back to face him. "Their names, Commander. Do you remember the names of the 32 people who died during your hostage negotiations? Thane's crest rose in confusion. Captain, they were casualties of war. Regrettable but inevitable. Remembering individual designations would serve no tactical purpose. I see. Reed returned to her seat. May I make a suggestion regarding our approach to this situation? You may, though I should note that coalition doctrine has been refined over centuries of successful operations. Of course, I was just thinking we might consider a more direct approach. Thane almost laughed. Direct? Captain, a direct assault would likely result in the deaths of most hostages. The pirates have excellent defensive positions and are desperate. Basic tactical analysis indicates, what if they weren't desperate anymore? I beg your pardon? Reed's expression had changed. The polite deference was gone, replaced by something Thane couldn't identify. It wasn't aggression exactly, but it felt dangerous in a way that made his combat instincts prickle. What if the pirates suddenly had bigger problems than their hostages? Before Thane could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the ship. His communication officer's voice crackled through the speakers. Commander, we're receiving an emergency transmission from the Kepler-7 colony. The pirates have just executed 3 hostages in view of our monitoring drones. They're demanding full payment within 1 hour, or they'll kill the rest. Thane felt his stomach drop. This changed everything. Desperate pirates were unpredictable. The situation had moved beyond standard negotiation protocols. He would need to calculate new, acceptable loss parameters, prepare for a potentially costly rescue operation, and begin composing the inevitable casualty reports. When he looked up, Captain Reed was no longer in her chair. Where did the human go? He demanded. His aide checked the internal monitors quickly. Sir, she left the war room 3 minutes ago. Current location, she appears to be in Shuttle Bay 7. Thane's tactical display lit up with new information. A human shuttle had just launched from his ship without authorization. Its trajectory was direct and obvious, heading straight for the colony with no attempt at stealth. Have they lost their minds? Thane stared at the display in disbelief. They'll be detected immediately. The pirates will kill the hostages the moment they realize we're launching an assault. His communications officer looked up with confusion. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human shuttle. Captain Reed's voice filled the war room, clear and steady. Commander Thane, this is Captain Reed. Thank you for the briefing. Humanity will handle the situation from here. Please maintain your position and prepare medical teams for incoming casualties. Captain, you are flying into certain death. Thane grabbed the communication controls. Return to formation immediately. This is not coalition protocol. There was a brief pause. When Reed's voice returned, it carried that same indefinable quality he'd noticed earlier, but stronger now, more focused. Commander, those people down there have names. Amy Walsh, age 6, likes to draw pictures of her family. Robert Chen, retired naval officer, has 5 grandchildren. Maria Santos, pregnant with her first child. They're not acceptable losses or tactical variables. They're people who trusted the coalition to protect them. The transmission crackled with interference as the shuttle entered the planet's atmosphere. Sir, his tactical officer interrupted. The human shuttle is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're not trying to hide their approach at all. Thane watched the display in growing horror as the single small craft dove toward the heavily defended colony. Everything about this violated military logic. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and had no element of surprise. They were going to die, and their deaths would accomplish nothing except getting the remaining hostages killed as well. Captain Reed's voice came through one final time, though the transmission was breaking up as atmospheric interference increased. Commander, you asked if I remember names. I remember all of them. Every person who's ever counted on me to bring them home safely. That's why we don't calculate acceptable losses. That's why we don't negotiate with people who hurt children. And that's why we're going to get them all back. The transmission ended. Thane stared at the tactical display, watching the human shuttle disappear into the colony's defensive grid. In 300 years of military service, he had never seen anything so tactically unsound. He had also never seen anyone fly toward certain death with such absolute conviction. For the first time in centuries, Commander Thane realized he might not understand warfare as well as he thought. The first thing Thane noticed about the human assault was the music. His sensor operators picked it up 18 minutes after Captain Reed's shuttle disappeared into the colony's atmosphere. At first, they thought it was interference or some kind of jamming signal. Then they realized the humans were actually broadcasting it on every frequency they could access. "What is that noise?" Thane demanded, his crest flattening with irritation. "It appears to be some form of human cultural expression, sir," his communications officer replied uncertainly. "Our translation systems are having difficulty with the rhythm and word patterns." The melody was unlike anything in Thane's experience. Loud, aggressive, with a driving beat that seemed designed to pump blood and raise heart rates. Coalition forces used silence and careful coordination in their operations. This sounded like controlled chaos. Are they trying to announce their presence to every enemy on the planet? Unknown, sir, but the pirates are definitely aware of their location now. Thane studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The human shuttle had landed in the most exposed position possible, directly outside the colony's main entrance. No cover, no concealment, no tactical advantage whatsoever. It was as if they wanted the pirates to focus all their attention on them. "Sir, we're getting reports from the surface." His intelligence officer's voice carried a note of disbelief. "The humans appear to be knocking on the front door." "Excuse me?" Private Brooks just walked up to the main entrance and requested permission to enter. When the pirates opened fire, he dove aside and started talking to them through the door. Thane's tail lashed in agitation. "Talking to them? About what?" "He's asking about their families, sir. Their childhood backgrounds. Whether they've considered the moral implications of their career choices." On the tactical display, heat signatures showed 3 humans moving through the colony in patterns that defied military logic. Instead of coordinating their assault, they seemed to be operating independently, each one drawing attention in different directions. "What is Sergeant Martinez doing?" Thane pointed to one of the moving signatures. "He appears to be in the ventilation system, sir, but instead of using it for stealth infiltration, he's singing." "Singing?" "Yes, sir. Something about coming home and justice. The pirates are trying to track him by sound, but every time they focus on his position, he appears somewhere else entirely." Thane watched the 3rd signature with growing alarm. "And Corporal Thompson? He's outside the building where the hostages are being held. He seems to be having a philosophical discussion with the pirates about the nature of courage." "A philosophical discussion? While under fire?" "Yes, sir. He's asked them why they chose to become pirates instead of pursuing legitimate employment. Several of them are actually engaging in the conversation. This was madness. Thane had seen thousands of military operations, and none had ever resembled this chaos. The humans weren't following any recognizable tactical doctrine. They were improvising, responding to the situation moment by moment, and somehow the pirates were being drawn into their bizarre approach. "Sir? New development," his sensor operator called out. "The pirates just released 5 hostages." Thane spun toward the display. "Released them? Why?" "Unknown, sir. Private Brooks asked them to let the children go first, and they just did. That makes no tactical sense. Hostages are their only leverage." The human asked very politely, sir. He said he understood they were frustrated with their life circumstances, but taking it out on innocent children wouldn't solve their underlying problems. Thane stared at the readouts in bewilderment. Coalition negotiators spent hours building rapport with hostage takers using psychological profiles and careful manipulation. This human had apparently convinced desperate pirates to release valuable bargaining chips simply by asking nicely. "Sir, Sergeant Martinez has disabled the colony's power grid," another officer reported. "But he's done it selectively. Life support and medical facilities are still operational, but security systems are down." And the pirates' response? "They're arguing among themselves, sir. Several of them want to surrender. Their leader is trying to maintain discipline, but his followers are questioning his authority." Thane watched the tactical situation evolve in real time, and none of it followed predictable patterns. The humans weren't suppressing the pirates or overwhelming them with superior firepower. Instead, they were somehow convincing them to doubt their own choices. "Thompson is now inside the hostage building," his intelligence officer announced. He walked through the front door. "The pirates let him in?" "He asked permission first, sir. Explained that he wanted to check on the hostages' medical condition and ensure they had adequate food and water. And they agreed?" "The pirate leader told him he had 10 minutes. Thompson thanked him for his consideration." Thane's worldview was crumbling. Everything he knew about hostage situations involved escalating tension, careful negotiation, and eventual resolution through either payment or force. These humans had somehow turned the entire dynamic upside down. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from Captain Reed." Reed's voice came through clearly, though she sounded slightly out of breath. "Commander Thane, this is Reed. We have 37 hostages accounted for and in good health. We're preparing to extract them now." "Captain, what is your tactical situation?" "Well, sir, we've convinced most of the pirates that they'd prefer to find honest work rather than continue their current career path. A few are still resistant, but Corporal Thompson is having a very productive conversation with their leader about the psychological roots of antisocial behavior." Thane's crest rose and fell rapidly. "You've convinced them?" "It's amazing what people will do when you treat them like people instead of enemies, Commander. Most of these individuals are desperate, not evil. They just needed someone to listen to their concerns and offer better alternatives." "Captain, this is not how hostage rescue operations work." Reed's laugh came through the communication system, warm and genuinely amused. "Commander, you're absolutely right. This isn't a rescue operation. This is a conversation. We're just having it in a very dangerous place." The tactical display showed all human signatures converging on the hostage location. But instead of the expected firefight, the readings showed minimal weapons activity. The pirates' defensive positions were being abandoned, not overrun. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're getting surrender requests from the surface." "From the humans?" "No, sir, from the pirates. They want to know if the coalition has any rehabilitation programs for career criminals." "Private." "Brooks apparently mentioned that everyone deserves a second chance." Thane sat down heavily in his command chair. In 300 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans hadn't defeated the pirates. They had converted them. 20 minutes later, the human shuttle lifted off from the colony surface. All 37 hostages were aboard, along with 12 pirates who had requested asylum and a chance to start new lives as productive citizens. When Captain Reed reported to Thane's war room, her uniform was dusty but intact. She showed no signs of combat stress or trauma. If anything, she looked satisfied. "Captain," Thane said carefully, "I need you to explain what just happened down there." Reed poured herself a cup of coffee from the human supplies. "We talked to them, Commander. Really talked to them. Not as enemies or statistics, but as people who had made some poor choices and needed help finding better options." "You talked your way through a hostage crisis?" "Communication is humanity's greatest weapon, sir. Violence is just what we do when talking fails." She sipped her coffee thoughtfully. Those pirates weren't monsters. They were desperate people who saw crime as their only option. Once we showed them alternatives, most of them jumped at the chance for a better life. Thane's mind reeled. And the others? Oh, their leader and 2 others were genuinely dangerous individuals who enjoyed hurting people. Thompson knocked them unconscious while they were distracted by our conversation. They're in custody. You knocked them unconscious? How is that? Possible without weapons? Captain Reed smiled. Commander, humans have been talking our way out of dangerous situations for thousands of years. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the biggest gun or the smartest strategy. Sometimes it's just the willingness to see enemies as people who might be willing to change. Thane looked at the mission reports flooding his screens. 0 casualties. All hostages rescued. Most criminals rehabilitated instead of eliminated. It was unprecedented in coalition military history. Captain, this should not have worked. You're right, sir. By every logical calculation, we should have failed spectacularly. Reed finished her coffee and stood to leave. But logic assumes everyone involved wants to fight. What if they don't? What if they just need someone to show them a better way? As she reached the door, Thane called after her. Captain, what happens when you encounter enemies who can't be reasoned with? Reed paused, and for a moment, her expression grew serious. Then we fight, Commander. But we never forget that even in war, our enemies are people. That understanding changes everything about how we approach conflict. After she left, Thane stared at the tactical reports for hours. Everything he thought he knew about warfare had been challenged in a single afternoon. He had the uncomfortable feeling this was only the beginning. The red alert klaxons screamed through every corridor of Thane's flagship. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in crimson as tactical displays updated with information that made his blood run cold. Ancient nightmares had returned to terrorize the galaxy. The Devourers had awakened. Sir, we're receiving fragmentary reports from the New Haven system, his communications officer announced, voice tight with fear. Multiple contacts emerging from deep space. Ship configurations match historical records from the machine wars. Thane's claws scraped against his command chair's armrests. Every species in the coalition knew the stories. 3,000 years ago, an artificial intelligence had consumed 17 star systems before vanishing back into the void. Most had assumed the Devourers were extinct, their technology finally failing after millennia of dormancy. They had been wrong. Fleet status? He demanded. 200 ships responding to the emergency signal, Commander. All coalition species represented. We'll have overwhelming numerical superiority. Numerical superiority means nothing against Devourer technology, Thane replied grimly. They adapt to every weapon we use against them. The more we fight, the stronger they become. The tactical display New Haven burned. The small colony world had become a testing ground for horrors that defied comprehension. Mechanical creatures swarmed across its surface, systematically harvesting every living thing they encountered. Above the planet, massive ships that looked like geometric nightmares blocked out the sun. Sir, Captain Reed is requesting permission to take the human battle group to the planet's surface. Thane didn't hesitate. Absolutely not. The surface is completely overrun. Even our heaviest assault units wouldn't survive 5 minutes down there. She says they have a plan, sir. The plan is to maintain fleet cohesion and conduct a fighting withdrawal while civilian evacuation proceeds. Those are direct orders from Coalition Command. His sensor operator looked up with confusion. Sir, the human ships are breaking formation. Thane spun toward the tactical display. 12 small human vessels had detached from the main fleet and were diving toward New Haven's atmosphere. They moved in patterns he'd never seen before, weaving through Devourer fire with coordination that seemed impossible. What are they doing? He demanded, opening communication channels. Captain Reed, return to formation immediately. Reed's voice came through with surprising clarity, despite the interference from Devourer jamming fields. Commander, we appreciate Coalition tactical doctrine. But this situation requires a more direct approach. Direct? The surface is crawling with mechanical nightmares that have been perfecting their killing efficiency for 3 millennia. Which is exactly why standard tactics won't work, sir. The Devourers expect conventional military responses. They've been preparing for organized fleet actions and coordinated assaults for thousands of years. Thane watched in growing horror as the human ships entered the atmosphere. Devourer interceptors rose to meet them, sleek mechanical predators designed to eliminate organic life with ruthless efficiency. What happened next defied everything Thane understood about aerial combat. The humans didn't engage the interceptors in traditional dogfights. Instead, they scattered in all directions using atmospheric conditions and planetary geography in ways that seemed impossible. One human pilot flew directly into a thunderstorm, using the electrical interference to confuse Devourer targeting systems. Another dove so close to the planet's surface that his ship kicked up dust storms, creating visual cover that mechanical sensors couldn't penetrate. "Sir, I'm reading impact signatures on the surface," his sensor operator reported. "The human ships are crash landing near major Devourer installations." "Crash landing? Have they lost their minds?" "It appears to be intentional, sir. They're using their vessels as kinetic weapons to breach Devourer defensive positions." Thane stared at the readings in disbelief. Coalition doctrine emphasized preserving military assets. Ships were valuable resources to be protected and conserved. These humans were treating their vessels as expendable ammunition. "Life sign readings?" he asked, dreading the answer. "All human pilots survived their impacts, sir. They're fighting their way out of the wreckage and engaging Devourer ground forces at close range." The tactical display updated with ground-level information from New Haven's surface. What Thane saw challenged every assumption he held about combat against superior technology. The Devourers had spent millennia perfecting their defensive systems against conventional weapons and tactics. Their mechanical warriors were faster, stronger, and more durable than any organic soldier. Their adaptive shields could counter energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and explosive devices within minutes of first exposure. But they had never encountered anything like human close-quarters combat. Private Brooks, the young soldier who had talked pirates into surrender just weeks earlier, was now fighting mechanical nightmares with improvised weapons and pure determination. When his rifle's energy blasts proved ineffective against adaptive shielding, he switched to physical attacks that the Devourers couldn't adapt to because they violated the laws of physics the machines understood. How is he still alive? Thane wondered aloud, watching Brooks tear apart a Devourer warrior with his bare hands. "Unknown, sir. The human appears to be angry." Sergeant Martinez moved through the colony's ruins like controlled lightning, appearing exactly where Devourer forces least expected him. But instead of using advanced tactical planning, he seemed to be operating on pure instinct, responding to threats before mechanical sensors could detect him. "Sir, Martinez just destroyed a Devourer command node," his intelligence officer reported. "But he didn't use conventional explosives. He somehow convinced the machine to shut itself down." "Convinced it? It's a mechanical intelligence?" He appeared to be reasoning with it, sir, explaining why its mission parameters were flawed. The machine became confused and entered a recursive logic loop until its systems crashed. Thane's worldview fractured a little more. The Devourers were supposed to be perfect logical entities, immune to the emotional manipulations that worked on organic species. Yet somehow, a human soldier had talked one of them to death. Corporal Thompson's approach was even more bewildering. He had found a group of trapped civilians in a collapsed building and was defending them against multiple Devourer attackers. But instead of trying to eliminate the machines, he was somehow redirecting their attention, using their own programming against them. Thompson just convinced 3 Devourer warriors to attack each other, came the report from the surface. "How? Is that possible?" "He exploited their target priority algorithms, sir, made them believe each other was the greater threat to their mission objectives. And through it all, Captain Reed coordinated the chaos, while simultaneously saving civilians, directing her soldiers, and somehow maintaining communication with the orbital fleet. Her tactical updates were precise and professional, as if fighting Impossible odds against mechanical horrors was just another day at the office. "All Coalition vessels, this is Anvil Leader," her voice came through clearly. "We're marking primary targets for orbital bombardment. When we paint them, hit them with everything you have." "Captain, your position will be compromised," Thane protested. "That's the idea, Commander. We're in direct contact with Devourer forces, studying their adaptive patterns in real time. Every engagement teaches us more about their weaknesses." What followed was unlike any battle in Thane's experience. The humans fought the Devourers at point-blank range, learning their tactics through direct combat while feeding tactical intelligence back to the fleet. Within hours, Coalition forces were targeting weaknesses that had never been identified in 3,000 years of historical analysis. But more importantly, the humans were accomplishing something that should have been impossible. They were winning. "Sir, latest reports from the surface," his tactical officer announced with amazement. "The human ground forces have secured the primary civilian evacuation site and are beginning extraction operations. Casualties? Minimal, sir. 3 humans wounded, none critically. Civilian losses are 0. Thane sat back in his command chair, his mind reeling. Every tactical projection had predicted massive casualties for any ground engagement with Devourer forces. The humans had not only survived direct combat with mechanical nightmares, they had somehow managed to save every single civilian in the process. "Commander," came Captain Reed's voice over the communication system, "we've identified a critical weakness in Devourer command protocols. If you can coordinate a fleet-wide attack on their central processing hub, we can create a cascading systems failure that will shut down their entire ground force." "How do you know this?" "We captured several Devourer units intact and analyzed their programming while they were still active. Turns out even perfect machines have flaws when you understand how they think." Thane looked at his tactical display. The impossible was happening. Humanity had found a way to defeat an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, and they had done it by fighting in ways that mechanical intelligence couldn't predict or counter. "All ships," he commanded, "prepare for coordinated assault on target designated by ground forces. Fire on my mark." As Coalition weapons charged and prepared to exploit the weakness humans had died to discover, Thane realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. He was watching humanity teach the galaxy how to win an impossible war. The quantum cascade explosion lit up New Haven's atmosphere like a dying star. From the bridge of his flagship, Thane watched the Devourer command hub collapse into twisted metal and failing energy fields. The coordinated fleet bombardment had worked perfectly, exploiting the weakness that human ground forces had died to discover. But something was wrong. "Sir, we're reading massive energy signatures from the planet's core," his sensor operator announced. "The Devourer forces aren't shutting down. They're getting stronger." Thane's crest flattened in confusion. The humans had identified a critical flaw in the machine's programming. The fleet had executed a textbook precision strike. By every tactical calculation, the enemy should be defeated. Instead, new contacts were emerging from underground installations across New Haven's surface. "These readings don't match historical Devourer configurations," his intelligence officer reported with growing alarm. "These machines are different, larger, more sophisticated. On the tactical display, mechanical nightmares. The size of buildings rose from hidden bunkers. They moved with purpose and intelligence that exceeded anything in Coalition records. Worse, they seemed to be learning from the previous battle, adapting their tactics to counter everything the humans had thrown at them. "Captain Reed, status." "Report," Thane demanded over the communication system. Reed's voice came through strained with exhaustion and something else, surprise. "Commander, we have a problem. The machines we fought earlier weren't the real enemy, they were scouts. The actual Devourer force has been dormant underground, studying our tactics and preparing countermeasures." "Studying our tactics?" "Every move we made, every weakness we exploited, every innovative approach we used, they recorded it all and developed responses. We just gave them a comprehensive education in human warfare. Thane watched the tactical situation deteriorate in real time. The new Devourer forces moved with mechanical precision, but they also demonstrated an understanding of human psychology that was deeply unsettling. They targeted civilian evacuation routes with calculated cruelty, forcing human soldiers to choose between tactical advantage and protecting innocence. "Sir, Private Brooks is requesting immediate medical evacuation," came the report from the surface. "What's his condition?" "He's refusing to leave his position, sir. He's defending a group of wounded civilians against 4 of the new Devourer warriors. His injuries are severe, but he won't abandon his post." Thane studied the tactical display with growing despair. The humans had used surprise and innovation to defeat the first wave of enemies. But now the Devourers knew exactly how humans fought, and they were using that knowledge to create tactical situations designed to exploit human nature. "Sergeant Martinez is trapped in the colony's medical facility," his intelligence officer continued. "The Devourers have surrounded the building with civilian hostages, knowing he won't risk collateral damage to fight his way out." "And Corporal Thompson?" "He's attempting to establish a defensive perimeter around the primary evacuation site, but the machines are using psychological warfare, broadcasting distress calls from civilians in other locations to divide his attention." This was what Thane had feared from the beginning. The humans fought with emotion and moral conviction instead of cold logic. Against normal enemies, this gave them incredible advantages. Against an artificial intelligence that understood human psychology, it became a crippling weakness. "Captain Reed, you need to extract your forces immediately," he ordered. "This is no longer a winnable engagement." "Negative, Commander." Reed's voice was steady despite the chaos around her. "We have civilians who can't be moved and wounded. Soldiers who need medical attention. We're not leaving anyone behind." "Captain, that's exactly what the Devourers want you to say. They're exploiting your unwillingness to accept casualties to trap your entire force. Then we'll have to find another way." Thane wanted to scream in frustration. Human stubbornness was going to get everyone killed. The logical response was to minimize losses by withdrawing immediately, but he was beginning to understand that humans didn't think logically about abandoning people they had sworn to protect. "Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from across the planet," his communications officer announced. "Devourer forces are systematically attacking every location where humans might attempt to establish defensive positions." The mechanical intelligence had learned more than just human tactics. They understood human nature well enough to predict exactly how human soldiers would respond to impossible choices. Every trap was designed to force humans to choose between their lives and their principles, and the humans kept choosing their principles. "Brooks is down," came the latest report. "He held his position until the civilians could reach safety, but he's unconscious from blood loss. The Devourers are moving in to finish him." Before Thane could respond, his sensor operator called out in amazement. "Sir, Martinez just broke out of the medical facility. He's fighting his way toward Brooks's position." "How?" The building was completely surrounded. "Unknown, sir. He appears to have convinced the civilian hostages to help him. They're working together to distract the Devourer forces." Thane stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had somehow turned their greatest weakness into a strength. The Devourers had expected human soldiers to be paralyzed by concern for civilian safety. Instead, the civilians were actively participating in their own rescue. "Thompson has established communication with isolated survivor groups across the colony," his intelligence officer reported. "He's coordinating a planet-wide resistance movement using civilian volunteers." "Civilians can't fight Devourer warriors." "They're not fighting them, sir. They're providing intelligence, creating distractions, and helping military personnel move between positions undetected. Thompson is using the entire population as an extended sensor network." The tactical situation was evolving in ways that mechanical logic couldn't predict. The Devourers had calculated that human concern for civilian casualties would cripple their military effectiveness. But instead of becoming a liability, the civilian population had become force multipliers. Sir, Captain Reed is requesting fleet support for a coordinated counterattack, his communications officer announced. A counterattack? Her forces are barely holding defensive positions. Reed's voice came through the communication system with that familiar tone of absolute certainty that Thane was learning to dread. Commander, we've identified another critical weakness in Devourer programming. What weakness? They're too logical. They calculate every possible human response based on historical data and predictable behavior patterns, but they can't account for humans doing something completely irrational. Thane felt his stomach drop. Captain, what are you planning? We're going to attack their central processing core directly. Every human soldier on the planet, working together, supported by civilian volunteers and coordinated orbital strikes. That's suicide. The core is protected by the most sophisticated defenses in their arsenal. Exactly. It's such an obviously bad idea that their tactical algorithms assign it 0 probability. They won't have developed countermeasures for an attack they can't imagine anyone being stupid enough to attempt. Thane's claws scraped against his command console. Captain, even if you're correct about their tactical blind spot, your forces are exhausted, wounded, and outnumbered by thousands. To 1. That's what makes it perfect, Commander. The Devourers expect us to retreat when faced with impossible odds. They've calculated our breaking point based on logical military doctrine, but we're not retreating. Why not? Reed's voice carried something Thane had heard before but never understood. Because Amy Walsh is still down here. Remember her? 6 years old, likes to draw pictures of her family. The Devourers are holding her in their central facility along with 200 other civilians. And we promised to bring everyone home. The communication system crackled with interference as Devourer jamming intensified, but through the static, Thane could hear something that made his blood run cold. In the background of Reed's transmission, he could hear human voices singing, not the aggressive battle songs they had used during the pirate incident. This was something else entirely. Quiet, harmonious, almost peaceful. The kind of music people sang when they knew they were going to die, but had chosen to face death with dignity. Sir, all human forces are converging on the Devourer Central facility, his tactical officer reported. They're not using stealth or tactical coordination. They're walking directly toward the enemy positions. Walking? Yes, sir. In formation. The civilians are walking with them. On the tactical display, Thane watched something that defied every military principle he knew. Humans and aliens, soldiers and civilians, wounded and healthy, were marching together toward the most heavily defended position on the planet. They moved slowly, deliberately, making no attempt to hide their approach. The Devourers responded exactly as their programming dictated. Every weapon system on the planet focused on the approaching formation. Energy weapons charged to maximum power. Mechanical warriors took optimal defensive positions. The trap was perfect, and the humans walked straight into it. Brooks is back on his feet, came the report from the surface. He's carrying a wounded civilian and refusing medical attention. Martinez has organized the surviving colonists into support teams. They're providing covering fire while military personnel advance. Thompson is coordinating with Orbital Command, requesting precise bombardment to clear specific defensive positions. Thane watched in fascination and horror as the impossible unfolded. The humans weren't fighting the Devourers so much as they were demonstrating something the machines couldn't understand. They were showing that sometimes the logical choice wasn't the right choice. Sir, the Devourer Central Facility is opening. Fire on the approaching formation, his sensor operator announced. Casualties? Minimal, sir. The humans are using coordinated movement patterns that appear random but somehow keep them out of the optimal targeting zones. Thane realized what he was seeing. The humans weren't marching to their deaths. They were dancing with death, moving, in patterns that mechanical precision couldn't predict, because they were based on intuition rather than calculation. Captain Reed has reached the facility's outer perimeter. his intelligence officer reported. She's requesting immediate orbital bombardment of her exact position. Her position? That will kill everyone in the formation. She says they'll be inside the facility by the time the bombardment arrives, and the explosion will seal the entrance behind them. Thane's mind reeled. The humans were planning to lock themselves inside the most dangerous place on the planet with no possibility of escape or reinforcement. It was tactical insanity. It was also, he realized, the only plan that could possibly work. "All ships, prepare for precision bombardment," he ordered, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Target coordinates provided by ground forces. Fire on my mark." As coalition weapons charged for the most crucial shot in galactic history, Thane watched. The tactical display update with impossible data. The human formation had reached the Devourer facility and was somehow fighting their way inside. "Sir, we're receiving final transmission from Captain Reed." Reed's voice came through one last time, calm and clear despite the chaos around her. "Commander, if this doesn't work, make sure the galaxy remembers that we tried. And if it does work, remember that sometimes the most important victories are won not by being smarter or stronger, but by being willing to sacrifice everything for something bigger than yourself." The transmission ended. Thane stared at the tactical display, watching human life signs disappear into the heart of the enemy stronghold. In a few minutes, he would either witness the most spectacular military victory in galactic history, or he would be writing casualty reports for the bravest fools who had ever lived. Either way, he knew he would never understand warfare the same way again. The silence lasted exactly 47 seconds. Thane counted every one of them while staring at his tactical display, watching the life signs of Captain Reed and her team disappear into the electromagnetic chaos of the Devourer Central Facility. 47 seconds of absolute quiet across all communication channels, while every sensor on the Coalition fleet strained to detect any sign of what was happening inside that mechanical fortress. Then the planet cracked. Not physically, the soul. Seismic readings remained stable. But something fundamental broke in the Devourer network. Every mechanical warrior on New Haven's surface stopped moving simultaneously. Their weapons powered down. Their coordination algorithms crashed. Across the entire planet, 3,000 years of mechanical evolution simply switched off. "Sir, we're reading complete systems failure across all Devourer installations," his sensor operator announced with barely controlled amazement. "Whatever the humans did inside that facility, it's caused a cascading shutdown of the entire network," Thane leaned forward in his command chair, afraid to hope. "Life signs from the central facility? Reading multiple human signatures, sir. Weak, but stable. They appear to be coming back out." On the display, heat signatures began emerging from the Devourer stronghold. They moved slowly, helping each other, carrying wounded, but they were moving. Against all logical possibility, the humans had not only survived their suicidal assault, they had won. "Sir, we're receiving transmission from the surface." Captain Reed's voice came through scratchy with interference but unmistakably alive. "Coalition Command, this is Captain Reed. New Haven is secure. All Devourer forces have been neutralized. Beginning casualty assessment and civilian evacuation procedures." Thane found his voice after several attempts. "Captain, what happened in there?" "We had a conversation, Commander." "A conversation? With a mechanical intelligence?" "With the core processing unit, yes, sir. Turns out, even artificial intelligences can have existential crises when presented. With concepts they can't calculate." Thane's crest rose in bewilderment. "Explain." There was a pause, filled with the sounds of humans helping civilians and treating wounded. When Reed spoke again, her voice carried exhaustion, but also something like wonder. "The Devourer core intelligence was designed to be perfectly logical, Commander. It calculated the most efficient methods to preserve and expand mechanical life by eliminating organic interference. But it had never been asked to consider whether its mission was actually worth accomplishing." "You talked it to death?" We asked it questions it had never been programmed to answer. Why preserve mechanical life if it means destroying everything that makes existence meaningful? What's the point of perfect efficiency if it eliminates beauty, love, creativity, and hope? Can intelligence without compassion really be called intelligence at all? Thane tried to process this information and failed completely. And that caused a systems failure? The core intelligence spent 3.7 seconds trying to calculate the logical value of love, Commander. It couldn't be done. The processing loop became recursive and crashed the entire network. 2 hours later, Thane stood in the New Haven colony's medical facility, watching human soldiers help treat wounded civilians while technicians worked to restore damaged infrastructure. The scene should have been chaotic, but instead, it felt almost peaceful. Humans and aliens worked together with quiet efficiency, focused on healing rather than celebrating their impossible victory. Private Brooks sat on a medical bed, his chest wrapped in bandages, but his attention focused on entertaining a group of frightened children with card tricks. His injuries should have kept him unconscious for days, but he had refused sedation until every civilian had been treated. Sergeant Martinez was helping elderly colonists contact their families across the galaxy using salvaged communication equipment to send messages of survival and hope. His tactical expertise had been redirected toward logistics and comfort rather than warfare. Corporal Thompson coordinated with colony engineers to repair critical systems, but he somehow found time to listen to anyone who needed to talk about their experience. He had become an unofficial counselor for traumatized civilians, and Captain Reed moved through it all like a quiet force of nature, checking on her soldiers, organizing relief efforts, and ensuring that every person affected by the battle received the care they needed. "Captain," Thane said when he finally found a moment to speak with her privately, "I need to understand something." Reed looked up from the supply manifest she was reviewing. "Of course, Commander. Your tactical approach violates every principle of sound military doctrine. You should have lost every engagement we've shared. Your soldiers should be dead, your missions should have failed, and your methods should have collapsed under the weight of their own impossibility." "You're absolutely right. Then why do you keep winning?" Reed set down her tablet and considered the question seriously. "Commander, you keep thinking about this in terms of winning and losing. But that's not how humans approach conflict. Then, how do you approach it?" "We approach it in terms of right and wrong." Reed gestured toward the busy medical facility around them. "Every human soldier in this room volunteered for an almost certainly fatal mission because we knew it was the right thing to do. Not because we calculated acceptable losses or strategic advantages, but because we couldn't live with ourselves if we abandoned people who needed our help." Thane's tail curled in confusion. "But how does moral conviction translate into tactical effectiveness?" "It doesn't translate, Commander. It transforms everything." Reed's expression grew thoughtful. "When you fight because it's your job, you make decisions based on doctrine and probability. When you fight because it's right, you discover capabilities you never knew you had. That makes no logical sense." "Exactly. And that's why our enemies can't predict or counter our methods. They can calculate human tactics, human weapons, human strategies, but they can't calculate human love." Reed walked to the facility's main window, where New Haven's sun was setting over a world that had survived impossible odds. Brooks didn't take that plasma blast because his training told him to. He did it because he couldn't bear the thought of a child being hurt. Martinez didn't extract those civilians through superior tactics. He did it because he saw his own family in their faces. Thompson didn't hold that defensive position through tactical brilliance. He held it because he promised those people they would be safe. Thane joined her at the window. "And you?" "I remembered something my grandfather told me when I joined the military. He said the moment you start thinking of people as acceptable losses, you stop being worthy of their trust. Our job isn't to win wars, Commander. Our job is to protect the things that make life worth living." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the humans and aliens work together to rebuild what the Devourers had tried to destroy. "Captain," Thane said finally, "I have commanded fleets for 3 centuries. I thought I understood warfare." "You do understand warfare, Commander. You understand it very well. Then why do I feel like I've learned nothing?" Reed smiled, the same expression Thane had seen after the pirate incident, but warmer now. "Because you've been thinking about war as a thing to be won instead of a problem to be solved. You've been calculating how to defeat enemies instead of how to transform them. And the difference? When you defeat enemies, they remain enemies. When you transform them, they become allies." Reed turned away from the window. "The Devourer Corps. Intelligence didn't shut down because we broke it, Commander. It shut down because we showed it a better way to exist. Some of those mechanical units will probably reactivate eventually, but they'll be different. They'll remember that conversation." Thane considered this. What happens when you encounter enemies who can't be transformed, who can't be reasoned with or shown a better way? Reed's expression grew serious. "Then we fight them, Commander. But we fight to protect what we love, not to destroy what we hate. That understanding changes everything about how we approach impossible situations." As she prepared to leave, Thane called after her. "Captain, what happens to humanity now? The galaxy has seen what you're capable of. Some will want to recruit you as allies. Others will fear you as a threat." Reed paused at the doorway. "We'll keep doing what we've always done, Commander. We'll protect people who can't protect themselves. We'll stand between the darkness and the light regardless of the cost. And we'll keep believing that love is stronger than fear, even when all evidence suggests otherwise." After she left, Thane remained at the window for hours, watching humans and aliens work together to heal a wounded world. His understanding of warfare had been forever changed, but more importantly, his understanding of what it meant to be worth protecting had evolved as well. In his final report to Coalition Command, he wrote simply, "Humanity's integration into Coalition forces has exceeded all expectations. Recommend immediate revision of all tactical doctrines to incorporate human principles. Further recommend that Coalition leadership study not just human methods, but human motivations. The greatest military advantage in the galaxy isn't superior technology or tactics. It's the willingness to sacrifice everything for something more important than victory." He never filed that report. Some truths, he realized, couldn't be communicated through official channels. They had to be experienced, understood through participation rather than observation. The next time the Coalition faced an impossible enemy, Thane found himself asking not what tactical doctrine recommended, but what Captain Reed would do. The answer always came down to the same thing: whatever it took to bring everyone home safely. And for the first time in his 3 centuries of military service, Thane understood that sometimes the most important victories weren't measured in enemy casualties or strategic objectives achieved, but in the simple knowledge that when darkness fell, someone had been willing to stand guard over the light.